The conference room hummed with conversation, and I stole a quick look at my phone. Ethan's name flashed on the screen, demanding my attention. I stepped into the hallway, bracing myself for the predictable exchange of pleasantries. "How's the journey treating you? When are you planning to get back home?" Ethan's voice cut through the air, icy and dripping with arrogance. "I'm divorcing you," he declared, a hint of victory in his voice. "I've sold the apartment, so it's on you to sort out your living situation now. Make sure you savor that." In that instant, air seemed to vanish from my lungs. I couldn't believe the audacity of it. I couldn't believe the utter absence of remorse. I couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. I gripped the phone tighter, feeling the weight of his words settle in. "I can't believe you sold the apartment." "Text?" I inquired, maintaining a calm demeanor. "Yeah," he replied, a dry laugh escaping his lips. "Samantha and I are in dire need of funds to establish our life together. I know she deserves more than a cramped little spot like that." Samantha? The name hit me like a slap, but deep down, I had been piecing it together for months. There was someone else in the picture. Ethan's late nights, those unexpected work trips, and the growing chasm between us, it all screamed of someone else lurking in the shadows. Hearing him say her name like that so nonchalantly made me feel like the unwelcome guest in their story. It ignited something fierce within me. "Sounds good," I replied, keeping my tone steady. I refused to let him see me break. That would give him the satisfaction he craved. "I'm Sophia, and until that phone call shattered my world, I believed I had married a man I could rely on." Ethan and I had been together for 6 years. It wasn't always smooth sailing, but I had faith in what we were building together. I remember the effort we put in to secure our apartment, a charming 2-bedroom in the city that captured my heart the instant I laid eyes on it. It wasn't merely a house, it stood as a testament to all we had created side by side. That was my assumption, at least. As I reflect on it now, the signs were all there. I had overlooked the small cracks in the foundation. Every time I brought up finances, Ethan's dismissive attitude was unmistakable. He'd flash that charming smile, lean in for a quick kiss, and just like that, my concerns were brushed aside. I had always thought his confidence stemmed from a solid grasp of his actions. In that moment, it hit me he thrived on the power of persuasion tactics over me. The rest of the day slipped by in a haze. I sat through client meetings, nodding at all the right moments, but my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and strategies. I thought I had it in the bag, that victory was mine for the taking. I could see it in his eyes. He believed he could pull the rug out from under me, sell the home I'd fought tooth and nail for, and just stroll away without a care in the world. Yet there was one critical piece of information he was completely unaware of. For months, the apartment deed had rested solely in my name. I transferred it after we refinanced earlier this year. Ethan had signed off on it without much hesitation, all for the sake of snagging a lower interest rate. I never understood why he never took the time to ask about the details or even glance at the paperwork he signed. His carelessness was set to be his downfall. When I stepped back into my hotel room that evening, the shock I felt had crystallized into a firm resolve. I refused to show weakness or plead for mercy. So Ethan was looking for a fight, huh? All right then. This was a battle I was determined to conquer. I picked up the phone and dialed Emma, my lawyer and a friend I've known for ages. I detailed the situation meticulously, keeping my voice steady while my heart pounded in my chest. "He actually sold the apartment?" she repeated, incredulous. "Does he really think he can pull that off without your say-so?" "Apparently not," I replied, a smirk tugging at the corners of my mouth. "I can tell he believes he's already poured that money into his new life with Samantha." "Really?" Emma scoffed, a dry laugh escaping her lips. "He's about to face a harsh reality. The sale isn't valid. I can demonstrate that I own it outright, and if he's taken any cash from the buyer, he's definitely in trouble for fraud." The moment I heard the word fraud, a rush of satisfaction coursed through me. "What's our next move?" I inquired. "First, we need to inform the buyer that the sale isn't legitimate," Emma stated, her tone firm and decisive. "Next, I'll put together a formal letter for Ethan, clearly laying out the repercussions of his actions. If he thinks he can pull another stunt, we'll see him in court." After I hung up, a peculiar calm washed over me, almost as if I had just made a pivotal decision. I could see it in Ethan's eyes. He thought he had me cornered, that I was left powerless and scrambling. But in truth, he had just orchestrated his own downfall, a masterclass in public embarrassment. I threw myself into my work for the remainder of the trip, pushing my emotions aside and directing all my energy toward the task at hand. The broken trust stung, but the thought of taking back my life and seeing Ethan's arrogance shatter fueled a determination in me that I hadn't experienced in ages. As I stepped onto the plane headed home, I felt a sense of readiness wash over me. I'm prepared to confront Ethan. I'm set to tear apart his web of deceit. I'm poised to turn the page and embrace this new chapter, leaving him behind. For me, this was never merely about victory. It was all about reclaiming power. As I sat on the flight home, I had hours to dissect how everything had fallen apart. I couldn't believe the level of arrogance Ethan displayed. It was astounding. He didn't bother to mask his broken trust, treating me like just another hurdle to crush on his way to freedom. Instead of letting anger take over, I zeroed in on my plans for when I got back. Ethan underestimated me, believing I was powerless. Little did he know I had been playing the long game all along, even without my own awareness. As the plane hit the tarmac, I immediately dialed Emma. "I'm back," I declared, pulling my suitcase from the luggage carousel with purpose. "What do we do next?" I informed the buyer, and she responded with a tone that was brisk and efficient. I could see the shock on their faces, and it was clear they weren't pleased with Ethan at all. They're on board, and that gives us a solid advantage. "What about Ethan?" I inquired. "This morning, I shot him a formal letter via email," she remarked. "It clearly states the illegality of the sale, confirms your sole ownership of the apartment, and highlights the potential consequences of engaging in fraud. I haven't heard back from him yet, but I can already picture the storm brewing. He's going to be furious, no doubt about it." "That's a solid plan," I mused. "I'll let him stew." As I stepped through the door, an unsettling silence enveloped the apartment. Ethan's belongings remained untouched, a silent testament to his absence. His jackets hung over the chair, his shoes scattered by the door. Yet, something was off. The energy in the room had changed. I inhaled sharply and placed my suitcase on the ground, fully aware that the confrontation was just around the corner. Ethan burst through the door that evening, his face flushed with rage and his phone gripped tightly in his hand. "What on earth is this?" I shouted, waving the letter Emma had sent. "So you're saying I can't sell the apartment?" "It's partially mine." "No, Ethan," I replied, my arms crossed and my tone steady. "No, it isn't. I've held the deed in my name for months now. I can't sell something I don't own." I could see him freeze, his expression caught between confusion and rage. "What are you getting at?" I snatched the deed from the file I had retrieved earlier, raising it for him to catch a glimpse. "Once we refinanced, I made sure to get the deed transferred into my name. Don't forget, you were the one who approved it. Did you really take the time to read the paperwork, or did you just breeze through it like you usually do?" He paused, silence hanging in the air like a loaded gun. Then his expression contorted into a mocking sneer. Text, "Oh, you really believe you have it all figured out, don't you? This changes nothing. I've sealed the deal, and trust me, you'll be the one left looking foolish when it all crumbles around you." I fixed my gaze on him, unwavering. "The sale's off, Ethan." I can sense the urgency in the buyer's voice. They're poised to escalate this to legal action if I don't refund the money. "Oh, and about the money." I leaned in, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Once you've touched a single cent of that deposit, you've really stepped into a deeper mess." For the first time, I felt Ethan's confidence falter. "You don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, his eyes darting away from mine. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," I replied, my voice unwavering. "For years, you've acted as if I wouldn't catch on to your little games. But you know what, Ethan? I've been watching closely, and now it's time for you to face the music." I watched him pace, frustration radiating off him in waves. "I can't believe this is happening. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. You're not just going to throw me out like that." I arched an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. "Oh, I definitely can. I hold the legal title to this apartment. You're welcome to stick around for the moment. But that's only because I'm allowing you the chance to plan your next step. Allow me to clarify something. I'm staying put." As the days passed, I could feel Ethan's anger morphing into something more intense, desperation. I could feel the urgency in his calls, each voicemail a mix of desperation and menace, shifting from pleading to veiled threats. Meanwhile, I watched as Emma meticulously tied up every loose end, her focus unwavering and her strategy clear. I watched as the buyer pulled the plug on the agreement, their anger directed squarely at Ethan for wasting their time and money. Meanwhile, Emma was already on it, drafting the preliminary paperwork for the separation proceedings with a sharp focus. "You're in a good position, Sophia," she said, her eyes locking onto mine during one of our meetings. "I've got to admit, Ethan's in a tough spot with no leverage to play. With the sale falling through and the illegal transaction charges looming, He knows he has no choice but to play ball if he wants to steer clear of an even bigger disaster. Her words brought a sense of relief, yet they struck a chord, highlighting just how much I had let Ethan dictate the course of my life. For years, I brushed off his dismissiveness and arrogance, convincing myself that engaging him wasn't worth the trouble. But in that moment, clarity struck me. I realized just how much I had sacrificed, and I was resolute in my decision to reclaim everything. One evening, Laura and my best friend showed up to tackle the chaos in my apartment. I boxed up Ethan's things, methodically stacking them in the corner of the living room. "How's he handling all of this?" I couldn't help but notice the smirk on her face as she held up one of his gaudy ties. "Really? This is what you chose?" "Not well," I replied, a laugh escaping me despite the situation. "He still thinks he can charm his way out of this, but I'm standing my ground." "Good," she remarked, casually tossing the tie into the box. "I won't give him an inch of my space or a second of my time. He doesn't deserve it." I nodded, a surge of gratitude washing over me for her unwavering support. For what felt like an eternity, I had been shouldering the weight of my marriage alone, managing both the emotional and financial strains while Ethan basked in the glory of my efforts. Now I had allies by my side, and that changed everything. The moment Ethan walked in with Samantha, I knew the last piece of my plan had clicked into place. I sat at the dining table, poring over some paperwork, when they strolled in as if they owned the joint. I glanced around, a smug smile creeping onto my face. I felt her arm loop through mine, a subtle yet deliberate move that spoke volumes. "So this is our spot, huh? I deserve this," she declared, her tone laced with a sense of superiority. I rose to my feet, heart racing, yet my determination remained steadfast. "No," I stated with conviction. "This is where I found Ethan's place." Text: "I won't let you stay here, Samantha." Her smile wavered as she shot a quick look at Ethan, whose expression mirrored her shock. "What's going on here?" "I want answers," he insisted. "Text: this," I declared, sweeping my hand to encompass the apartment, "is where I live. This place isn't yours, it's not hers, and it's definitely not a hotel for you to crash in after you've betrayed me." Samantha's gaze hardened, yet she remained silent. Ethan seemed ready to burst at the seams. "I can't let you go through with this," I shouted. "You're not being fair here." I locked eyes with him, unwavering. "Absolutely not, Ethan. It's absurd to believe you can sell my home, pocket the cash, and think I'll just sit back and accept it without a fight. Consider yourself fortunate that I haven't taken legal action yet." I stood in the doorway, frustration boiling inside me, while Samantha crossed her arms, her discomfort palpable. "You're being ridiculous, Sophia," he said, desperation creeping into his tone. "You're not seriously thinking you can just throw me out of my own house, are you?" I stepped forward, my voice steady and resolute. "This is my territory, Ethan. I've held the deed in my name for months now, and you're well aware of that fact." Text: "I watched you sign the paperwork, your pen moving swiftly across the page, as if you were too eager to pause and actually read what you were agreeing to, just like every other time. This place, it's not yours anymore." I caught Samantha's eye, and I noticed her perfectly manicured hand grip her purse strap a little tighter. "Hold on, what is she getting at?" I could hear the edge in her voice as she asked. "You claimed this was your apartment, that you had sold it." I noticed him flinch, his hand instinctively waving her off. "It's a tangled web. I've got this covered. It's really quite simple," I replied, moving in closer. "I attempted to sell an apartment that wasn't mine to begin with. The sale is off, Ethan. Right now, you're in a tough spot with no solid ground to back you up." Samantha's facade began to shatter. "So, you're talking about the cash you claimed was in your possession?" I could see her pause, her voice climbing in intensity. "Seriously? You lied about that as well?" "Samantha, let me explain," Ethan said quickly, raising his hands defensively. She wasn't going to let that slide. "No," I interrupted, my voice firm and decisive. "Allow me to clarify." Ethan thought he could pull a fast one on me, trying to sell the apartment without my knowledge, aiming to pocket the cash and leave me empty-handed. Little did he realize, I had already secured the deed in my name months back. He didn't just miss the sale. He crossed the line into a legal transaction by pretending he had the ability to make it happen. Samantha's mouth moved in a frantic rhythm, like a fish struggling for breath. Fraud, she whispered, stepping back from him, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. Are you really serious right now? Fraud, I declared, arms crossed defiantly. I'm ready to take action if he doesn't gather his belongings and vacate by day's end. At last, I saw through Ethan's facade. It was like watching a carefully constructed wall crumble before my eyes. You can't do this, Sophia, he said, his voice taking on a desperate edge. After 6 years together, you really think you can just toss me aside like that? You tossed me aside the instant you dialed that number, I shot back, my tone steely. You said you were divorcing me, and then you laughed as if my search for a new place to live was some kind of joke. You didn't just stab me in the back, Ethan. You aimed to ruin our relationship I've built. Don't just stand there pretending you're the victim. I watched as Samantha stepped back, her gaze flicking nervously between us. This is insane, I muttered, gripping my purse tighter. Why didn't you fill me in on any of this, Ethan? I thought you had it all under control. I could see the desperation etched on his face as he turned to her. Samantha, I've got this under control. I need to figure this out. She interrupted him, her hand slicing through the air like a blade. Stop right there. Just don't. I refuse to be pulled into your chaos. She pivoted sharply, her heels clicking against the floor as she stormed out, leaving me there utterly stunned. A grin crept onto my face as the door clicked shut behind her. Looks like you're on your own, I remarked, pivoting back to Ethan. All right, let's dive into what comes next. I watched him slump onto the couch, his face disappearing into his hands. It was a clear sign of defeat, and I knew I had to say something sharp to cut through the silence. Sophia, I need you to listen carefully. I messed up, plain and simple. I'm aware of that. I know you think this is necessary, but it really isn't. You're right, I replied, snatching a folder from the kitchen counter and placing it deliberately on the coffee table in front of him. I could walk away, but I won't. I'm in this and I know exactly why. Here's the separation paperwork. I've got my lawyer on it, and I recommend you sign it without delay. If you act quickly, we can both leave this behind us sooner. I watched him stare at the folder, his face draining of color. Do you really despise me that much? Do I really hate you? I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. No, Ethan, it's not hate I feel for you. I can't help but feel a twinge of pity for you. I had it all, someone who loved me, a home we crafted together. But you tossed it aside, blinded by your own ego. I stood there, heart racing, yet my determination remained steadfast. Text, you need to be gone by the end of the day. Grab your stuff and decide where you're heading next. This is the final moment I'm extending you any leniency. I could see him gearing up for a fight, but then he hesitated, his shoulders drooping as if the weight of the world had settled on them. Fine, I muttered, the words slipping out with a hint of defiance. I'll take the lead. Good, I remarked, striding confidently toward the door. And don't even consider attempting anything different. Emma's got everything under control, and if you step out of line again, I'll make sure the courts take it from there. As I swung the door open, I caught Ethan rising to his feet, his hand reaching for his coat with deliberate precision. I watched him leave, his footsteps echoing with the weight of defeat, never once glancing back at me. For a brief moment, a wave of sadness washed over me. Not for him, but for the life that could have been ours if he had lived up to the man I believed he was. That moment slipped away in an instant, giving way to a wave of relief. I shut the door firmly, securing it with the new key I had just crafted. This was my territory now, and I'd be damned if Ethan or anyone else thought they could take it from me again. Once Ethan walked out, the silence in the apartment hit me like a brick wall. After years of suffocating pressure, I finally felt the weight lift and I could breathe again. His presence, once suffocating with entitlement and deceit, had finally lifted from the space. There I stood in the home I had crafted with my own hands, a quiet victory washing over me. I had triumphed not just over him, but over every whisper of doubt that had ever tried to hold me back from standing my ground. I found myself in the center of the living room, absorbing the stark void left by his absence. His massive gaming chair was missing, the framed jerseys that once cluttered the walls had vanished, and that tacky coffee table he was so attached to? It was nowhere to be found. The apartment felt revitalized, radiating a sense of ownership that I had almost forgotten. That evening, Olivia showed up with takeout in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. Is he truly gone? I watched her as she plopped down on the couch, letting out a dramatic sigh that filled the room. Gone and not coming back, I declared, filling 2 glasses with wine. I told him he had until the end of the day to get his stuff together. He simply nodded, no words exchanged. I lifted my glass, a silent toast to the moment. Here's to new beginnings and the triumphs we've earned. I clinked my glass against hers, the sound sharp and clear, a moment of victory as the weight of the past week began to lift. I'm done allowing anyone to trample on my boundaries. In the days that followed, I set out to reclaim the apartment, tackling it piece by piece with precision. I shifted the furniture around, placed my favorite artwork front and center in the living room, and filled the space with items that brought me joy. It was more than simply redecorating. I was determined to transform the apartment into a true reflection of myself, not the version Ethan had attempted to mold me into. Emma called with updates on the legal proceedings, her voice radiating confidence that made me feel unstoppable. The illegal transaction charges? They're off the table now. The buyer chose not to pursue them. As for the separation paperwork, that's progressing without a hitch. As soon as Ethan puts pen to paper, that's it. You'll finally be free. When I heard the word free, a tightness gripped my chest. It was never just about the divorce. It was the weight of everything I'd been shouldering for years. As I stood there, I could feel the weight of resentment and self-doubt beginning to lift. The sense of being trapped in a marriage that never truly valued me was finally fading away. I made several attempts to connect with Ethan. His messages swung from weak apologies to desperate ploys aimed at making me feel guilty about not reconciling. I realized I had messed up. One read, "Can we at least have a conversation about this?" One was clearly more desperate. "Sophia, you're on the brink of destroying everything I've built. Is that really what you want?" I held my silence. This time, I decided not to expend my energy on something that was irreparably damaged. I had seen him make those choices, and now he was facing the fallout head-on. By the end of the week, I had transformed the apartment into a space that radiated warmth and invitation, a place that truly felt like my own. Perched on the couch, tea in hand, I gazed out at the city lights flickering like distant stars. My mind raced through the events that had unfolded. Ethan's broken trust hit me like a punch to the gut, but it also snapped me into reality. I had convinced myself for far too long that I wasn't worthy of anything more, that I had to accept the meager bits of respect and affection he chose to offer. But now I had a clearer understanding. I wasn't merely taking back my apartment, I was taking back my life. A month later, everything about my life had transformed dramatically. I stood in the apartment and it was unrecognizable, not due to any drastic renovations, but because of the palpable shift in its atmosphere. This space was a true reflection of who I am, my tastes, my personality, and the independence I had just embraced. Without Ethan's clutter and his overwhelming presence, the home felt lighter, more liberated. The separation was progressing without a hitch. I watched as Emma navigated the situation with precision, leaving Ethan no room to argue or complicate things. She was in control and it showed. I watched him sign the papers, a quick motion that spoke volumes. He knew he was outmatched and there was no point in dragging it out. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation, nor was there a heartfelt attempt to reconcile. It was a cold, clean break, bittersweet yet deeply satisfying, a moment that lingered in the air like a well-placed remark. As I rifled through a stack of old papers, a photo of Ethan and me from our early days together caught my eye. I felt the warmth of our smiles, arms wrapped around each other, brimming with hope and promise. I fixed my gaze on it, allowing the flood of memories to engulf me. There were times, moments when I felt we were genuinely crafting a future side by side. Yet, those moments faded away, eclipsed by a long history of neglect, manipulation, and broken trust. I slid the photo into an envelope, sealing it away in the drawer, out of sight and out of mind. I knew it didn't belong out in the open, yet I couldn't bring myself to part with it just yet. That chapter belonged to my past, but it no longer held the power to define who I am. Olivia and I marked the end of my marriage with a dinner and drinks at a chic rooftop bar downtown. It felt like the perfect way to close that chapter. "You're glowing," she remarked, lifting her cocktail in a toast. "Being single really works for me." A laugh escaped me, a warmth flooding through me that I hadn't experienced in years. It's not just the single life, I remarked. It's all about the freedom. For the first time, I finally feel free from the constraints of someone else's rules. I raised my glass, and as the night unfolded, a surge of pride welled up within me. I had just navigated one of the toughest challenges of my life, and I emerged on the other side, stronger than ever. I was thriving, navigating every challenge with purpose. I was on top of my game. Once I stepped through the door, my mind shifted into high gear, mapping out the future ahead. The apartment had transformed into something beyond just a refuge for me. It stood as a testament to all I had fought to regain. I was certain this wasn't my final destination. One day I would escape to a new place, a fresh start free from the shadows of my past with Ethan. I was resolute, ready to seize every moment in the space I had battled fiercely to maintain. Curling up on the couch that night, I felt a wave of peace envelop me. I recalled Ethan's laughter during that phone call, his confidence radiating as if he had already claimed victory. I found myself smiling, unable to resist the urge. His arrogance was his undoing, while my quiet strength became my refuge. This was more than the conclusion of a marriage. The dawn of a new chapter unfolded before me, a chapter where I held the reins, where happiness was mine to define. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I experienced a sense of true freedom.